Hi, my name is Oscar. I have been keeping and rescuing blue-tongued skinks for years. I'm a zoology student, and this is a science-based guide on the best substrates for the Australian subspecies of blue-tongued skinks. If you've been in the reptile hobby for any amount of time, you've heard about calcium sand. It's usually discussed in regards to bearded dragons, but I've heard of quite a few people using it for blue-tongued skinks as well, or as the sand portion of a sand-soil mixture. This is completely unacceptable, as sand in general doesn't support natural humidity or burrowing behaviors for any subspecies of blue-tongued skinks. It's also incredibly dusty, and if they swallow it, which they almost undoubtedly will, as they are prone to swallowing things that they should not, it will clump up inside their stomach and cause impaction. The properties of calcium sand can also neutralize their stomach acid, which makes it even harder for them to digest. It's incredibly dusty, which can also pose risks to their respiratory system. Just don't do it. I see rodent bedding being used quite a bit, which is another one that I don't really recommend because it gets really, really dusty. It can mold quite easily. It supports a bit of moisture, it doesn't hold in any moisture, which makes it easy to keep moisture down. But if you are spiking up the humidity in your tank, it will probably mold. It can be really dusty, which poses a huge risk to their respiratory system. And if they happen to swallow it for whatever reason, again, blueies are idiots, it will expand inside their guts and potentially cause life-threatening illness. I have really strong feelings about this one. I believe that blue-tongued skinks should always be kept on loose substrate unless there's some extensive circumstances. That bluey in the picture, that's my bluey YB, my pet. He was supposed to be a rescue and rehome, but due in part to his substrate, he needs too much ongoing care to rehome. You can see how awful that tank is. While there's no impaction risk, the benefits are greatly outweighed by the risks. It rips their toenails out, it's infamous for harboring parasites, they can't burrow, and of course it doesn't hold up any kind of humidity, it just holds the ambient humidity in the room. You need at least two so that you're always washing one while the other one is being used, and it's just overall not economic or healthy for your skink. I have strong feelings about all coconut fiber derived substrates for blue-tongued skinks that are really commonly used, that are amazing to a degree. Quite often, and I don't see this issue talked about ever really, they will lead to respiratory issues if they puncture the lungs, or if any dust gets into the lungs, or even if any of the little fibers get into the lungs. It's not very common that they'll get impacted from it. It's incredibly cheap. It holds humidity really well, although if you don't dry it out properly first, the humidity will spike a lot, which is potentially life-threatening. And if it's too dry, it will get really, really dusty. I've helped a few people with that issue. It can cause quite severe bleeding. I'm just going to put up a warning, and you can skip to the timestamp shown on the video if you don't want to see that. If you do want to see two images of blue-tongued skinks who I know personally who have been injured by this substrate, that's coming right up and you'll want to pause it. I have permission from both of the keepers of these two skinks to use these images, and they are both completely fine now. Aspen's a really common one. This isn't one that I have personal experience with, but I know many keepers who do. It holds tunnels well, it's great for burrowing creatures, it's easy to spot feces in, and a lot of breeders use this for their bins. However, it can be really, really dusty. There are potential mold issues if it gets any kind of moisture in it, so it's absolutely not okay for Indonesian subspecies, and it's really messy. If it gets out of the tank in any way, shape or form, it will stick to your feet and get all through the house, which is just not fun. Also, it's not naturalistic at all. Reptibark is another substrate that's marketed specifically for reptiles, which is generally a sign that you can get something cheaper from the garden store, just make sure it doesn't have pine in it. It's very naturalistic looking, it's easy to dig through, but of course, big chunky bits of wood, huge impaction risk, and quite hard to clear up. My skink has had potential issues from just snails, but that's probably due to his abuse in the past. Also, there are huge splinter risks to both humans and your reptiles. I would recommend this substrate if you mix it through with dirt and sand, so that there's not as much risk of splinters. Okay, this is a substrate that I really recommend. a 60% organic topsoil to a 40% clay sand, and it can't be calcium sand or anything. It's brilliant. This is the substrate I use. Ignore how awful my tank is at the moment. I'm in the process of moving and I'll have a tank build video up soon. This is a pretty similar substrate to what they'd have in the wild around Sydney and stuff. It supports tunnels really well, it supports plants really well, it's perfect for the moisture needs. And it's amazing. You can manipulate it. You can see in these clips how well it moves through my hands, how well it holds Whitey's tunnels when he comes out of it. He just loves burrowing in there. The plants thrive in it. However, again, like Aspen, it can be really messy. It gets everywhere if you don't have a quality substrate barrier, which are very hard to find in my country. In my latest tank build for my skinks, I've included a bit of coir in there. Hopefully that will support the bioactive setup I have for them. I'll do a video on that as well. And it seems to be working really, really well. The humidity is a bit high with the coir in there, but hopefully it'll dry out soon. Here are some other substrates on the screen that I have not used personally as they are not available in my country. I live in New Zealand. The BioDude is obviously American. I haven't experimented with these, but I have heard wonderful things about them from trusted sources, and I do recommend them. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. I hope that you've learned something, and if you have any questions, pop them down below. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and consider checking out my Patreon.